remember Red Sporting Goods store,
Sure.
and I don't know how long they were there, probably about 5 years or so.
All longer than
A lot of
that.
it, was it?
Oh, way back, yeah.
But that was a place to go to learn about the guns and stuff that you like to have.
Where was that?
Well, that was right,
Next to the dairy diner. Right next to the dairy diner.
Originally, they were
Red Graver.
up on the hill next to the laundromat and Donnie Dill's
Oh,
old shop. That was Red Graver's.
I don't remember a gun place.
all guns, knives, fishing rods.
Okay.
I think-
Well, then Red River, so
Next to the
this
old
became,
nest.
at that time, what?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. yeah.
Well, Graber actually was the first one, I think, in that pure oil gas station.
Right.
Right on the corner, and then after that, then he built the building next door, which was just purely a sporting goods store.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he had a big pure oil, I believe it was.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Big gas station,
Yeah.
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 Gleason had a gas station.
Same
right
place.
on the
Same
corner.
place.
Same
Well,
one.
the same one.
That's-
Yeah, but then, when they had that one, then they had, remember Mitch's Diner was right next to it, right in the same spot there? I remember we went over there one night, a bunch of us, guys from Orono, and, for a hamburger, I suppose, I don't know what it was, but I remember you were with Tom and Robertson and Stetler and a bunch of these other guys, we went in to get a hamburger, and then I noticed here was Charlie Coffey, Gary Erdman, Kanan, some of these other guys that were all state wrestlers, sitting up in the front. And I told these guys that we were with, I said, whatever you do, I said, don't get into a fight, just don't.
Excuse me, Jerry, but are you speaking, when you said Mitch's, wasn't that the Golden Horn?
No,
No?
Mitch's Dairy Diner.
Where was Mitch's?
Mitch's was on the other side. You had the Golden Horn, Red Graver's, and then Mitch's, up in the corner. That was part of the pure oil building.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, they had a
Okay,
restaurant in there.
Okay.
Wasn't there a greenhouse too in Spring Park down by the, in
Yes,
the
yes,
hollow?
yes. Who owned that?
Well, it was Tom Green,
Tom
Yeah,
Green.
Tom Green, who also
Yeah,
had
the green, that was a good
his
restaurant.
phone company.
phone company, yeah.
Okay.
We saw him in what newspaper we saw that he was in there for some reason, in the,
Well, he wound up, actually, he actually was one of the best neighbors I ever had, but he had some problems. And he wound up with, remember the time when they weren't building convertibles anymore?
yes.
And he converted.
He was in a business where you'd convert cars into convertibles, and it worked out pretty good for him, so he started selling franchises. Well, the problem, he sold the franchises to these guys, they never got the franchise stuff. So he went to federal prison, and his son and his nephew
Yeah.
all went to federal prison for that, so but he was a nice guy.
And also he had a telephone,
Other
paid
than-
telephone company too.
For a short time,
And he had for a short time, a paid telephone company.
So,
yeah.
Remember that?
He had the phone company too,
Yeah.
yeah.
And how about a guy, speaking of Tom Green, do you remember Jim Sherber?
Yeah.
Paul Sherber,
Yeah.
older brother
Yeah.
Jim. I think we were just talking about this the other day, and I think about 1957.
6 or 7.
He opened a place in Spring Park called the Crescendo.
Where the Minnetonka Drive-In is now,
Right.
was a much smaller
And he
little
painted it
drive-in.
purple,
Yeah,
and he had bought an oven from a hotel in Minneapolis that was taken down. And a person that I went to school with in Wayzata played in the band on top of the roof with his band, Denny Burgess. He said he played for Hamburgers. And it was painted purple, he had a rock and roll band on top, and that was for one summer.
one summer and it was
Oh.
over, yeah.
Remember it all?
There was one before that even, same place, where the A&W. Yeah, it was called the R&L Drive-In. And I saw old pictures of it, and I figured it was Ruth and Lenny Plumidor, because they were in every restaurant. But as research said, it wasn't, it was,
The son-
Nelson.
Nelson, the son of the.
Oh,
the guy that was the-
Ralph and Lillian
Nelson.
Nelson.
Well,
Yeah.
they became postmasters.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and then they were
They had a couple.
later were postmasters of Spring Park, but nobody I talked to ever heard of the R and
I
L.
remember that.
Yeah, I remember that now, but that's who it was then,
Yeah,
yeah. They were the postmaster and postmistress.
What did you say, Tom, about the Wicklands became, not the downbeat, but what?
Lakeview.
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 That was Bob
I
Burke.
got, those,
Bob
I get
Burke,
those
yeah.
two restaurants.
Bob Burke, yeah, he was the king of the Lakeview, that's right.
Yeah, Bob Burke. Then, what was the guy that owned the downbeat?
Dick Bruce.
Brusick, yeah.
I remember when I worked at the Downbeat, that there was bouncers at both the Lakeview and the Downbeat, and it got kind of rough. And people that were either caught without having a you know, underage drinking or fighting or whatever, they would set up court at night, right after every place closed. They would go down, there was a little courthouse right where the ballpark is now, it was about the size of a fish house. And, remember that? It was.
I remember it very well.
You were the JP.
I was the judge of the peace.
There's some money there.
So anyway, I can remember going home from there, and they'd have Porky or Ray Tharlson would have had some people that were arrested, and they would go home, and there'd be this little one light bulb go on, and the JP would show up, and justice would be served right about within 3 hours of the actual crime. So anyway, that was quite a system.
Well, it was that, the interesting part about that is that you never had to, well, Porky came to me one time, he asked me if I wanted to, be the justice of the peace. I think I was 23 years old, I don't know, anyhow. And I said, well, I'll try it or whatever. We had a run for office, when you got it. Anyhow, so you never had to have your case tried there. You could always have a change of venue, to go to municipal court. But that was a cash cow for Spring Park at the time. Because you get these people that would come in, and the most you could fine them was $100. And then I used to get $4 court costs. And it was, usually we had it like on Wednesday or Thursday night. And it was just like a whole parade of people that, for whatever reason, they tried to get in with a false ID. So this one night, well, there was 2 incidents there, where one of them was, sometimes the police would show up and sometimes they wouldn't. And I remember this one time, they didn't show up. And, there probably were 25, 30 people there. And so what I did was I suspended the fines on all of them, collected my $4 cost, and left. And my God, within an hour, Porky was at my house wondering what I was doing. I said, I told you guys, I said, I don't like being down there alone. And I said, maybe now you'll come down to the courthouse.
Yeah.
So, but there was a kid that came in one time, the Pearson Nut Goody candy bars.
Yes.
They came out there, and he had a bunch of his buddies with him. And they all got nailed for trying to get in without a license, or without an ID. False IDs, yeah. And so he just sat there and wrote checks out for all of them. One guy would come up, he'd just write out a check for him. Another guy came up, he'd write out a check. He just paid for all of them right there. But that was an interesting judicial system.
Yes, it was.
Did he have to include your $4?
Absolutely, yeah.
One thing I've always wondered about Spring Park, that pump that was out in front of where the mist used to be,
Yeah.
was that why they called it Spring Park? Because there was an artesian well there, I was told originally, and that the Indians used the artesian well, and then it became Spring Park and went on from there.
I don't think it goes back that far.
Oh, yeah.
I think
Yeah,
Yeah.
The Indians?
Yeah.
Yeah?
The Indians would come up from Shakopee
You bet.
and all over and have their meetings here because of that water.
Spring Park and
They used to
Wayzata
bring
were
their containers and
Yeah.
pump.
No, I don't think they.
People would also
It
get their water from this building when it was over in Spring Park. There was a outdoor faucet, and people would come and get their
Yeah.
water there.
That
Also-
pump down there was a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody went to that
Why,
pump.
I wonder if they still do.
No, that's not there.
Well, the
is it?
county.
It's
I thought
not
the
there
county-
anymore,
No, I
no.
thought the county took it over.
No. I
Well,
I would've wondered about that.
I redid that pump. It was $1,800 because my
Well,
wife's snowmobile went right through it, took it off. That was back in the early '70s.
well, when the city did well number 3, then we had, the engineers were out here, and there were some historical people that came on that, and they said that we were down so deep when we never hit water. And they said that we will get to water just before we get to the, what they call the red caustics. And they said what used to happen was the trains would come in here, and there was like an artesian well that was down here.
Okay.
And then they'd fill up their trains with that water, and that was one of the reasons, I guess they called it the Spring Park. That's what they said, but I don't have any authenticity on that at all.
I had a couple things. I was doing research for some story, but I came across an old Laker. You ever want an old Laker, an old
Pilot.
pilot?
Yeah.
You know, Pilot was here from 1922 up till '65. But if you ever wanna read an old one, or you know, cause all they'll tell you is they don't exist anyplace. But they have basically the complete set at Ridgedale at the library.
Oh.
They're all on microfilm, very, very accessible. But
That's good
when I was
information.
reading, and whatever I was looking for, I don't remember, but I saw this little article and it says, 2 city officials arrested on Lake Minnetonka. So I read it and it was, fits right in with this meeting because it was, they had caught these guys with way too many fish. And who it was O.P. Hansen
Oh, yeah.
up on the hill.
Yeah.
He had the minnow dealership up across from Lord Fletcher's on the hill.
Yeah.
O.P. Hansen and Bill Moe.
Oh, young Bill Mo.
Yeah, they were both, they called them both resort owners or bait owners or something. And the fine was $25 a piece, I remember that, but,
That was big at that time.
one other guy we had in Spring Park back through the 60s and that, I'm sure you remember when I mentioned his name. The guy never worked, but he made a pretty good living because he would just find work for everybody else. And he'd charge them, everybody understood the whole thing. This guy's name was Ed Burns. And we called him Mr. 10%. Because he'd get you a job and he didn't want to do it, so he'd find a carpenter or somebody to do it, but he wanted 10% of that take. And so, and he did pretty well. But,
Well, you know,
one other, one thing where you can see where Porky really had the respect of everybody, the kids and everything, is you take on, after Halloween back in those days, you go through Spring Park, there wasn't a mark on anything, nothing. And you go to Mound, and you couldn't even see the stores for the waxed windows. You know, that was one. Another one, I got on a Liberty bus one time down in Oceana, Virginia, and I was in the service, and they made a couple other pickups, and I sat down next to this guy. I think we were going into Virginia Beach, and we started talking. Where are you from? Where are you from? And anyway, he said, west of Minneapolis. He said, is that out by the Downbeat? And I said, yeah. Yeah, and he said, tell me, he said, they still have that black curly-haired tough cop down there?
Oh.
That would be Ray Thorlton, and he told me, I was sneaking up the hill, he said, I knew he was behind me because I saw him, but I watched, and he said, I had a bottle of beer with me, and he said, finally, I just flipped it, which would be right about where your house is, down in the weeds, and he said, Thorlton, hey, get down there, get that bottle.
Oh.
He said, I'd bring it to the top, he'd say, no, that ain't the one, go back. He said, if I brought one bottle up that night, I brought 50 bottles up that night. And you were trying to think of the name of the beauty shop, that was Chris and Gladys Burza.
Oh, I remember Gladys.
Yeah, the Astro Beauty Shop.
Chris was her husband?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, Chris, yeah, and he sold little,
Yeah.
There was a barber shop there too.
Wendy's.
No,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, Leon's.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
right next to Babe and Don's.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Another one is the owner of that grocery store back a ways was Cliff and Kay Tank.
Oh, not
Tank,
Tank,
yeah.
Cliff.
Tank.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I gotta tell you a story about Joe Gibson, seeing Gene brought it up, but, Jerry and I thought, until we were about 9, 10 years old, that Joe Gibson was a member of our family. Because my dad had the joint down on Maxwell Bay, Roxy's, and so he would close up and he'd head for home, and we usually lived somewhere on Island Park in those days, and Dad would stop at Joe Gibson's. Well, then they would stay there till Joe was gonna close, and I think Joe was afraid to go home because it got too late. But I don't know how many years I woke up in the morning every day, and there's Joe sleeping on our couch.
One thing comes to mind, we did a lot of business with Cox Brothers, and Ray Peters, and,
Frank Wallen,
Frank Weiland
yeah.
were truck drivers for Cox Brothers. And I can remember when they had the 4-yard loads, and then they got the new trucks, how many yards were they?
There was 6 guys.
Yeah, and these two guys were competitors anyway. And I can remember one time they came on the job, and they had just taken the two trucks, put them nose to nose where the church is just south of Maple Plain, to see which one had more power. And they literally dug themselves into the ground.
Didn't you sell dirt by the truckload?
Pardon?
Weren't you in the dirt in a truckload? Didn't I
Yeah,
buy some from you one time?
dirt, yeah, we actually ended up with Cox Brothers and
Oh,
Chanhassen Ready Mix and
Okay.
Shakopee,
'Cause I
and we
remember-
sold eventually to Apple Valley Ready Mix, but.
I remember
yeah,
dealing
but,
with
yeah, I
you.
eventually took over Cox
Oh,
Brothers.
okay.
And, we had it for, 10, 15 years, then we ended up selling to Apple Valley Ready Mix, or the Fisher Group out of Minneapolis, but.
But this is when I lived on Pheasant Road.
Right, yeah, but we had, and we used to do a lot of snow plowing for the village of Spring Park. And when we had that big, huge, storm, when the Vikings they were playing in the Super Bowl one year, and we had a tremendous, snowstorm. And remember, our guys plowed all day and all night to
Oh.
keep the roads open, yeah, but we did all the plowing for Spring Park for a number of years, yeah. And the
As
Sandy.
Cox Brothers?
Yeah, no, that was after Western Concrete.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That might have been about the same time that Ilias wanted the job for Spring Park, and he had bid on it, and he was a low bidder. And so he really started to raise some, we knew what kind of a job you guys had done, because you've done a good job for years and years and
Yeah,
years.
well, we had,
So we went ahead and went with Western, and that really upset Jules. I mean, Jules Ilias, he was really pissed off about that. So he started to raise the issue, and so we finally said, fine, we'll just go ahead and we'll issue it to you. And so we went back and told him, he said, no, I said, I don't want it now.
You know that Dick and Mary McCurdy have the dry cleaner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You all know that Mary died about 2 weeks ago. Did you know that Dick died yesterday?
No.
No.
Yeah,
No, I didn't.
yeah.
No.
So about 2 weeks apart. Yeah.
One of the-
They lived together in a room at Presbyterian
Oh,
Home.
they did. When they were building Lord Fletcher's restaurant, they bought all their material from the lumberyard, like up on top of the hill there.
yeah,
And you remember Spike Larson, or he was Spike?
yes.
Oh,
yeah,
Spike
I went to
was,
school with
Spike was the driver, and then he drove.
Convertible he bought, and he only went from the lumberyard to the downbeat, and then to Island Park to his house. And that was about it, so after about 8 years, he had a '62 Chevy convertible with, maybe 4,000 miles on it, but there wasn't a part of the body that wasn't dented.
So you didn't buy it?
No, but the other Spike Larson story, the lumberyard, and Porky also worked, the cop, worked at the lumberyard. And so every week, Porky would go to town and make the run on Wednesdays or whatever it was, pick up here, there, come back, and that went on for years. Well, one Wednesday, Porky was sick. So Spike took the run. And he took off, and Porky always came back like 4:45, he got in there. Spike took the run, and he was back before lunch. Porky said, "What the heck you doing?" He said, "You're ruining everything for me."
Oh, what was Porky's last name?
Wilkes.
Oh, yes.
Don Wilkes.
I remember now.
Don Wilkes.
What was his first name?
Don.
Don, okay.
He's buried next to my dad up in Union
Is
Cemetery.
he?
yeah.
There's one place I remember, and no one's really talked about it here, was the Newport Cafe,
Yeah.
down where Fletcher's apartments are now. And that was always kind of after hours, you finished your meetings, you went down there and you had a beer or whatever, and they had a bowling team, I bowled for the Newport.
I never heard of that.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was really, I think it was,
Who owned that?
Cox. Don.
Dutch. Oh,
Right
Dutch,
down
yeah.
on the
Dutch
lake
Cox
shore?
owned it.
Right on the
Maxine,
lake?
didn't she?
Right,
Maxine.
right on the
Maxine.
lake.
Yeah.
right where the Fletchers are.
Oh,
Maxine and Dutch Cox.
Yeah,
ran it.
yeah,
I remember that now.
the Newport.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
You could come by boat.
Our neighbor
Oh, yeah.
Don
Yeah.
whatever, he was a cook down there for.
Westmoreland.
Westmoreland.
Yeah, Donnie Westmoreland.
Oh, Donnie Westmoreland, okay.
Yeah, he was,
Yeah.
and he was
He
an
lived over
Ingram
here,
too
right
down
on
there, and
Spring
he had
Park.
some fun things going on once in a while down there, but, the other one was, Cliff Tank was mayor, and that's the house that we bought when we first moved in here. What you talked about, the water in Spring Park, at that time, people that lived in Spring Park had no water, we had no city water.
No, we have wells.
Wells, and then you use the lake for whatever, and,
We didn't.
oh, a lot of people still
Yeah,
do.
we
They
did.
had, the water pumped out of the lake, you had screens over the stuff. And then we would take our milk can and go down to Spring Park and fill up, and that was what we used for cooking and stuff like that. Until some mayor at the time, and I can't think of who it was, but he was an instigator in putting water and sewer in Spring Park. And I have to laugh now when I listen to people complain because they're having some street work done and they have to maybe park someplace else. Well, Spring Park was smart enough, they put water and sewer in at the same time, so you only had one
Smart.
hole. And at that time, they still had the railroad tracks and our crossing. So we had to go all the way around to get up to Scarrett's to park our cars and go back and forth. And I think of the mud and stuff that we walked through that, and I listen to people complaining now because they have to do a little bit. The other thing was Fletcher's had some really good times when they had their wet t-shirt contest.
Oh, the wet t-shirt.
You
Yeah.
couldn't find a parking spot on Sunset.
Do they
and one-
still have it?
No.
No.
They only had that once.
Did they?
Well, they had a
Oh, no,
couple of
no,
times.
they had it.
Somebody
Yeah.
The
else
wet
went
t-shirt
through the
contest.
road.
The other one was the suntan deal.
Trying to get
Wet t-shirt
that
contest was only
pan.
once.
I was
Up
in
on the
that
roof.
suntan.
Yeah, the
Well,
suntan deal was
Yeah.
good.
Somebody complained about
Tommy
it,
Kramer.
and they asked, well, where are you? And she said, well, she was on the other side of the channel, she had binoculars, and she was complaining about the t-shirt contest.
Oh, the binoculars.
Yeah, so, and Porky was the nicest policeman you could ever have. In our case, our daughter had taken a fall into the lake, and so they had the fire department come down, and they were gonna wait until somebody could take her to the hospital, and Porky said, no way, get in. So Porky took one of the firemen and myself, and we hiked over to Waconia Hospital, and he just knew what spots to hit, because when we got close to Bonnie, there was this dip, and she just upchucked, and he said, see, that's what this was, that's what he was aiming for.
So then she was okay.
Yeah, well, she was in the hospital still, but, yeah, from that on, but he was super nice.
Do the guys from Stern Electric still live down there?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Jan Stern and his brother,
Ed
His
was
grandson.
his grandson?
Wasn't
yeah.
Ed's the father,
No, his brother.
His
brother?
brother to
Yeah.
the father, yeah.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the Newport, that was the same time that they had finished Lord Fletcher's restaurant, and Bob Nagley bought the Newport property.
We did.
Yeah, and his plan for the Newport property was to build a 20-story apartment building with a revolving restaurant on top.
That's right.
That kind of appealed to me. I thought it was a pretty neat idea. And we had a public hearing on it, and honest to God, it was just amazing, because people came in, and I'll never forget, remember one of the questions was that, well, in a big wind, do you think that's gonna stand up? Anyhow, what happened was they had a real strong credit crunch in I think it was about 68, and then that killed the project, so. Otherwise, it had a revolving
Yeah.
restaurant right there.
Who, anybody?
Down to Bob, maybe?
You want it, Bob?
Down to Bob?
Bob?
No, no.
Here, I'll take
Oh, I
Go
got a
ahead,
couple
Tom.
other stories.
You got more? Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
You know, we had Porky as our chief of police, and then, of course, we had Ray Thorlson, who worked part-time as a policeman. And like Tom said, Ray Thorlson's one guy you never ever wanted to mess around with, because he worked for the Minnesota Department of
Weights and measures. Yeah.
And he was a very strong guy and a tough guy. And Ray was another guy that on his nights off, he liked to find a place where he can get into a good fight. Well, he did, that's just part of the deal. So he was Porky's helper. Well, then we decided to hire, I don't know if you remember Gordy Swenson or not.
Yeah.
But Gordy, we hired Gordy as a utility guy, part-time, and then as a policeman, part-time. So Gordy would be like on, in other words, it would fill out a full-time job for him. So they had their squad car parked between your mom and dad's house and the downbeat. And Ray is out just getting the hell out of, I mean, he just loved to get into fights, and people like to come out and fight with him. I mean, it's just completely different. So Ray is out there, and he really needs some help, and he's looking for Gordy. Gordy is sitting in the car, writing out a report. Ray came over and he says, "What the hell are you doing?" Gordy says, "Well, I'm just trying to get these reports up to date." He says, "Did you ever look out the window?" He says, "Like I might need some help." And then the Golden Horn was another, that was really kind of like a central location for a lot of things that went on. And one of the things that went on there was that the police would always congregate there, all the time. And then if they got a call, they had a red light up on top on a pole, and then they'd flip that on, and they knew that they had a police call. But anything that was gonna happen in Spring Park would usually happen at the Golden Horn. And they had a dog one time that had gotten hit, and it was dead. And so it was on, I don't remember if it was on the Spring Park side or the Orno side, but they took, and when the police from Orno came down, because they were always down there all the time, they would take and they'd drag that dog into Spring Park on the Spring Park side of the line. And then they'd come in and tell Porky and them, get that dead dog down there, let's get rid of him. So then Ray and Porky would go and move it back over into Orno. That went on for quite a while.
I remember parking in front of the should I take
Yeah,
that?
go ahead.
Yeah, we were going to Culberg's, David and I, for dinner. There was no parking place there, but there was in front of the Golden Horn. And we used to stop there a lot on our way home from being at Eckrich for a sandwich.
Yeah, I forgot about Eckrich.
So, we couldn't park in front of Culberg's, so we parked in front of the Golden Horn. He came running out and said, "If you're not coming in here, you can't park here," and he made us go away. We couldn't park there.
Huh.
I remember him for that.
What was that Neil's last name?
Hey, what?
Neil, he
Neil
was,
Cook.
Neil Cook.
yeah, he drove truck for us. He wanted to go on the road, he drove over the road, down in southern Minnesota,
Are you sure it's the same Neil Cook?
yeah, he had his wife, yeah.
We nicknamed him Nutty Neil.
Yeah,
Oh, he'd get mad and close the place up
Oh,
for 3-4
yeah.
days.
For whatever reason.
and he'd drive over the road, yeah.
Talk about, small town community. I come home and leave one night from the Navy, and the guys I was riding with were in Wayzata and went straight. I said, "Just drop me off at the Clark station." It was like 3 in the morning. So no way could I call my parents at that time in the morning, so I called the Golden Horn, because they were open 24 hours a day. And I called and I asked for a couple people. I asked for Donnie Dill and I asked for somebody else, and I said, "Will you just ask if anybody knows Tom Rockvale?" Pretty soon, Thurlson, "Yeah, what do you want?" I said, "I'm in Spring Park, or in Wayzata." I said, "I need a ride home." I said, "I just came from Virginia." "All right." So they come down in the Spring Park squad car, pick me up
Yeah?
at the Clark station, come back, and he said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "I really don't know, because my mom and dad moved again." And he said, "Don't worry, I know where they moved to." One other thing about that area in Spring Park, you talk about the Dello.
Yes.
That Dello building used to sit next to the not post office, the Coral, which the laundromat.
Oh, yeah.
That whole building. And Speed Lindquist moved that down to where it was, the Dello building, which, is a heck of a feat. And it's kind of an interesting story. And
Yeah.
that's when Culbergs went in there with the restaurant, and they always had a barber on the other side, I think, so.
One time, Grant Swanson and Lindquist, what's his name?
Speed.
Speed, owned a restaurant up there. right where, kind of where the log cabin is.
Yeah, that was this building.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
their big thing was electrically fried chicken.
Oh, yeah?
And on my birthday, that's where my parents, on August 31st, took me for dinner
Huh.
to that electrically fried chicken, Grant Speeds.
You know, there was one other business that was never mentioned, and I won't mention any names, but it was just a quiet 3-2 beer joint grocery store, sat right on the corner down by Cox Brothers, and it was called Bill Putz,
yes, I say, yeah, that's grocery.
Putz Grocery.
Yeah,
And one night, a Moundite came around with his mother's station wagon and didn't quite make that corner. Went right straight through the building
Oh.
with that station wagon, and that was the end of it. They just tore the rest of the
Yeah.
building down, and Bill Putz never went back in business.
so is that right?
I'll add a little to that story. The guy that did it was well, he was a classmate of my wife's, and he's quite a character. And the next day, he came up, I was selling cars in Navarre for my father-in-law at Navarre Motors, and he came up and he said, yeah, I need to get a new car. And I said, yeah, I think you do. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, he said, you better give me the best deal. He said, or I'll run that car right through your building.
That had to be Brian, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, man. Well, somebody was talking here about ice fishing. And the reason that we wound up out here, when we did, was my dad and grandfather moved out to ice fish in the middle of the winter. And they never went back, they just stayed out here all the time, so. It's something that I never really caught on with, so.
Give me that once more. You know, one other thing before we forget it, and I'm sure a lot of us, you remember too, it was a big deal back in the 50s, was Dunk the Clunk.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
You know, where
Yeah.
they'd have the car out right in front of the Golden Horn.
yeah.
And it was, then of course the EPA got involved, then they had to take the engines out and all this and that, but,
Didn't they have to sell tickets?
oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, you sold tickets, there is a lot of money with that.
Yeah.
But one guy we all know on this side of the table, and he's passed away now, but he walked, Porky was
I forgot about
in
that.
establishment and those, he walked backwards with a 5-gallon can of gas from the end of Castro Point all the way to that Dunk the Clunk. He poured all the gas in there, threw the can in there, walked around the other side, threw a match in there, and then walked backwards up on shore. And they all come down there and they look and this thing is just blazing and fire departments and he said, Porky comes in there, he said, what happened? He said, I don't know, but his footprints go right out here, and he said, I think they go right.
Because he was backwards.
I had it backwards all the way.
So did you win?
Yeah,
Oh.
that was probably his date. Yeah, the date that he had chosen.
I got another quick story.
Good.
I knew Ray Tharlson pretty well, and he was really a good guy, and my younger brother knew him pretty well too. And he was only about 16 or 17, and one night about 11:30 or so, he pulled through Spring Park and just went right through the stoplight. This is probably 11, 12 at night. And he just took off, and by the time before he got to Navarre, he had Ray was behind him, and of course he didn't know who it was, but, so he just kept going and went faster and went down to Minnetonka Beach and down at the other end of Minnetonka Beach before Arcola, on that kind of a sharp corner. He went in the ditch, he was going too fast.
Oh.
Ray came up behind him and said, you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm okay. Pulled him out of the car and he just beat him about 3 times. He said, well, Ray, you told me you'd always give me a break, and he said, well, not if you tried to outrun me.
Well, the things that they did then, you know, if you look in a dictionary under police harassment, you'd find a picture of Ray.
Yeah.
I think
You know, when we first moved out to Spring Park, our family, The downbeat was called Jack Mellon's place. I don't know if you
I don't
remember
Yeah.
that.
No,
Jack Mellon eventually had a smaller bar on the lakes side of the downbeat. And it was just kind of a tavern, wasn't very big. But I remember that Dick Brusick at the downbeat used to say, you know, we got so many doggone bottles, beer bottles all over the place here after a big weekend. And so he said to me one day, you know, if you kids could get these beer bottles out of here, I'd make it worth your while. So we all got our wagons on Sunday morning, and we cleaned out all the ditches and any place that had a beer bottle. And we'd have to crawl under things too to get to them, because that was another thing they did is they finished their beer and they kind of threw them where you wouldn't see them. But we got them all, and we got 3 cents
a bottle.
a bottle for those
Yeah.
beer bottles. That's kind of
Did you do
interesting.
it every Sunday?
Every Sunday,
Wow.
Oh.
Did you wanna show your picture?
yeah. This is left over from the glory days is in 1963. Wait a minute, that's when this thing was painted.
Yeah.
This is the downtown area of Skunk Hollow. By the way, Skunk Hollow really was, I've heard some people talking about it, but when the Hotel Delatero had their kitchen going up in their area, they used to dump down into the hollow things that they wanted to throw away. We had all those, we had coons and all kinds of things that would dig out that food and eat it. And it was just a big problem as it turned out,
Including skunks?
including
Yeah.
skunks.
Was that down where the ballpark is and?
No.
No.
No, it was
Up
right
by the
down,
hotel.
down where all the businesses were
Oh,
in the old days.
Okay.
I've heard that story too, Jerry.
Well, Dick Moss sat up on the, like where the trail is now, and by memory, you know, did that picture.
Take one.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah, it's a nice picture.
yeah, I see that.
Then we had
Thank
some
you.
color put into it before it was printed,
Yeah, it really looks great.
and
Yeah,
it
same
turned
picture.
out pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, looks real
And
good.
I think there's probably a few of these left over someplace, but
I have one.
this was part of the celebration of the
Centennial, or,
Gala Day,
yeah.
In 2001.
2001.
Is that
I'd
what it
like
was?
to get one of those for the boys.
Are Dick and Don still alive?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Jerry, are those available someplace to buy?
Uh,
I think my boys might enjoy that.
I don't know, maybe somebody.
You know, Bob, you might be able to answer this. Dick and Don Ma had the Lakeview.
Yeah.
Do you remember them having the lighthouse?
There too.
That was Doc Yuckas, I think, that had.
Doc Eckes?
Yeah.
Yeah, mhm, that was Doc.
Okay, because someone
I
said,
thought that was Dick Ma too.
yeah.
Could have been, I don't know.
One of them.
The mom was
Well,
one of
did
them.
Bob Barrett buy it from Dick Don Moss?
No,
No.
those two brothers rented it. from
They just
Bob.
sublease it to
One
them
was
like that.
many renters.
Sublet it.
Get Barrett bringing partners every year or something, and then we'd short.
You'd have a new owner in the lake.
But there's certain things you cannot find a picture of. One is Newport, which you brought up.
Right.
The other one is the lighthouse, which was down in Orono.
Yeah.
You know, but you can't, I've looked everywhere for those.
It was right next to Max Pizza.
Max
Well, the
Pizza.
lighthouse show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, there was a boat deal between
Right,
them.
between them, yeah.
And Corey Smart on the other side.
Yeah.
That was next door to the Max Pizza, wasn't it? The
Yeah,
lighthouse.
yeah, the lighthouse.
Margie's
Does
house.
anybody else have any other memories? What'll
You
happen,
talk for 10 hours here, I think.
what'll happen is you'll leave and then you'll think about 14 different things.
Yeah, you're right.
You could really say on the deal. But the parking in Spring Park really was a problem. You talk about, you know, people parking in the Minnetonka Beach and everything, because there wasn't any place to park, you just parked in the street. And that, I'm trying to remember when that came to an end. I can't remember the exact year on it, but I remember the city or the council decided you have to do something about this because you can't go on like this. And at the time, Paul Standard had bought he had the mist, and he paid the guys at the lumberyard, I think 40,000 for 2 lots up on top, so he had parking. So it was like a pattern had been established.
Right.
So we drafted an ordinance that said, well, you're gonna have, all the businesses have to have off-street parking. I'll tell you, it was really kind of a fun time walking around down in the Spring Park every day. And these guys just literally hated you, for whatever. But they finally came up and everybody, we finally wound up getting off-street parking, and it did alleviate some of the problems, but it was way out of hand. You just couldn't handle it.
Where Bayview is now and Edgewater, what was there originally before it became Bayview?
Nothing.
Nothing.
It was just a big,
It was a big,
That was
had the rise,
that
it
was
went
the
up a
woods.
ways.
Yeah.
And we used to have beer parties and.
Yeah.
Well,
park
that's
there.
up like right where that picnic area was.
Well, the picnic area is where Edgewater was.
Okay, then the other part was
Yeah.
just the woods.
Yeah.
That was a really a nice place, that where Edgewater,
Yeah.
that beach and stuff.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it had great big poplar trees
Yeah.
or cottonwood trees there.
That was quite a swimming beach. We used to swim.
Yeah,
go there
all
at
the
night.
time. Had the best
Yeah.
beach on the lake.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
but I remember we went over there all the time at night this winter.
Yeah.
This has been great.
Okay, well.
If it's true, as we all think it probably is true, that we'll leave and you'll have a memory that you forgot to share. If you would call the museum, 472-9800, or go online, westonkahistoricalsociety.com. We'd love to have the memories.
Okay.
We'll transcribe the tape, and I'll come back and check with you about the stories, because I won't be able to spell anything, and you'll have to help me with the stories and all of that, I brought along a copy for you of the Spring Park document from 2001, because it has some great photos in it, in case you weren't here at the program in 2001. And it tells you again about Skunk Hollow, of course.
One of the things that my grandfather used to do was he had like a side business where they cleaned coils in restaurants and bars, I guess when they pulled the beer out, they had to clean the coils or something. I don't know exactly what it was. I'd always go with them, kind of hang around. And so I was telling someone this story one time, and I said, yeah, I'd always go with them and just kind of watch them and stuff. And I said, one time we were down in, I think it was Britt Gorman's place, cleaning it, because he did that one, and then at the time, Ernie Green owned the greenhouse, or the Don and Dave's at that time. And I said, I was sitting there, and I was probably around 7 years old, I don't know. And I thought to myself, God, would this be a great spot to open a marina?
The guy believed you.
And the guy believed me.
The guy believed him.
Oh, Lord.
I commuted my 1.5 years to Roosevelt High School in Minneapolis, because I didn't want to change at that point, because we had moved out here for year-round. And the point I'm making is, I ride into town with my dad, and he dropped me off on Hennepin and Washington, and I take that streetcar bus all the way out to
Washburn.
Roosevelt.
Oh, Roosevelt. Okay.
And then I went to the university for 2 years, did the same thing. But anyway, the thing I'm getting to, the bus, you could buy a book of tickets, 25 for $6.25.
Wow.
Little different than now.
Wonderful transportation, that's for sure.
Well, I'm really glad everybody came. I think we'll see what Pam comes up with on this, and if we had anything that's worthwhile, but it was really kind of interesting.
Just terrific. Thank you, Ted.